Hi, and welcome to the Unhinged History Podcast, the podcast where two compulsive nut jobs are going to binge history memes and then compulsively research the backstories behind them and join forces once a week to verbally assault their co host with the stories they've only recently learned. I'm assailant number one. I'm Theresa. And that,
What is what is it when you're like guilty by association?
Angie.
That's me.
Guilty
I
by
just
proxy?
realized, yeah, maybe that's what it is. Like because you chose not, you like you knew, but you chose not to alert the authorities, you're guilty too.
An accessory.
I'm an accessory to your crimes, and I'm proud to be here, to be
Okay.
honest.
I had planned on like I'd found this one random short story and I was like, oh, you know what? Okay, this can't be very long. And then I pulled the thread and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And Angie, I'm taking the full episode.
My heart is so ready for this. But before you take the full episode, can I just tell you, I don't know how I've missed this before, but you have a bronchiosaurus just chilling on your shelf over there.
Yeah, been there for ever.
What's
Since the
his name?
walls were painted blue. I don't know. It
I
was
love
one of
him.
those, it's what happens when you need to update your house or your office to be more appropriate for video calls. And you tell kiddo, hey, I need you to come with me to Home Goods. And we have like $50. And she's like, we need the bronze Brachiosaurus. We need it. And I'm like, put it
She
in the cart.
she's not wrong, to be honest. I also like that you currently have a chair in front of Olga, so she is not menacingly scaring anyone that you film.
That chair is going to go back to the front porch, but it had to get refinished and it was curing. It's been a thing. It's been a thing.
Oh, I thought it was there just to protect your viewers from
No,
her menacing stare.
I'm not here to protect anyone from Olga, when I'm honest.
Good for you. My God, I'm proud to know you.
So
Okay, carry on.
I found a story and I want to say that I know where it came from. The truth is I don't. Because I just in my podcast notes or in my notes for stories, I just had three words: the wide awakes. Know who told me about it, know where I heard the reference. And so I would look at it and go, the what's? Okay.
Pardon? The
And
wide
so,
awakes. Is this
yeah,
gonna tie into nightmares?
no, no nightmares,
Wow, okay.
no Katy Perry.
Okay.
All right.
Dang it.
My sources, I started with podcasts as I do. The Side Door, which is from the Smithsonian, they have the Wide Awakes. The Road to Now, the Wide Awakes, the Forgotten Force that elected Lincoln and spurred the Civil War with John Grinspan. History Unplugged, a radical abolitionist youth movement consumed America in 1860, elected Lincoln, then disappeared completely. The National Park Service.
Oh, carry on.
Well, hold on, no, go on.
I have the what they're on my list of podcasts.
You've listened to an episode about the Wide Awakes?
No, the man, I forget what we were talking about one day, but I asked him a question, I think in regards to Lincoln. And he went on this mission to answer that question, whatever it was, and that's when we came across this group of young individuals.
Okay.
That is all I remember. I'm so excited.
All right. National Park Service, The Wide Awake, The Young Revolution of 1860, Smithsonian Magazine, The Club of Cape-wearing activists who helped elect Lincoln and spark the Civil War by John Grinspan. Are you ready?
Can I just tell you the visual that I have for whatever reason when you said 1860s, I was imagining the 1960s, but putting it in 1860 context. And now let me tell you about the Summer of Love.
I mean, funny you say that because I start in the 1960s.
Oh, fascinating. Let's go.
Although I did it for a different reason. I did it because I needed to remind myself that the Republicans and Democrats and what they stand for now seems to have switched. They have shifted values, and those
If you
values
will.
were shifted after the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Um, and this is something I keep forgetting.
Okay.
So, for whatever reason, my mind for this fact is a Teflon skillet.
Boop.
Yep, just slides right on off. So I just want to remind my own brain, and if you are like my brain, come along, that when the Civil Rights Act passed, many white conservative Southern Democrats became Republicans. And the South, that had been mostly Democratic before 1864, is now mostly Republican, even though, that you're going to see little pockets of Democrats, for
You mean
lack of better words.
1964, right?
Yes, 1964.
Okay. Okay.
So now we're going to go back 100 years.
Okay.
Now we're going to go to the 1860s. Um, in episode 26, that's titled When in Doubt Capitalism, you covered Cassius Clay, the Cassius Clay, which is
Mm.
the namesake of Cassius Clay, who becomes Muhammad Ali.
My guy.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, and we're gonna tie into that. Okay.
Love this.
So there's gonna be like a lot of like hold that thought. Relevance is coming as
I'm
as
so
much as I hate
excited.
it. Okay. So at this point, people they're opposed to slavery, but they don't quite want to abolish it. They're anti-large plantations taking up the small family-owned farms and whatnot. But they don't necessarily hate slavery, if that makes sense.
Right. Okay.
Now, the Southerners only make up about a quarter of the population.
Wow.
Most of the population is Northern based.
Okay. For some reason, I thought it was pretty 50-50 at that point.
Well, you'd be
I
wrong.
learned something new.
And only 2% of Americans own slaves.
That's still really high. Um,
It is. It is. But when we think of an entire revolution for 2%,
yeah, okay.
so to appease the South were given the three-fifths vote or the three-fifths compromise, that ensured that power skewed to the South. So they're counting Black people towards representational votes, not giving Black people votes, but counting their votes or counting them towards seats in
Mm.
legislature.
Right, okay.
By 1860, this had given 30 extra congressmen to the Southern states.
This is how we ended up with so many electoral votes in California. I just know it.
I don't go into that. I don't know. Um, but the Southern states, because they have this political power, this gives them extra votes. So when an additional state comes into the Union and is voted on whether it's going to be slaveholding or free, it gives the South the opportunity to lean heavy-handed and want for slave.
Okay.
Okay. All of this background is relevant, I promise you. Now, we have some, big things happening. There's the Mexican American War. This is happening with by force. So with that, you have Texas and the whole nine. Now, as this is happening, as everything's kicking off, as all of this awful stuff is happening, it's easy for you and I to think that if we were in, say, New York City and speaking out against slavery, that our votes, our thoughts, our minds, our free speech would be maybe not applauded, but we would have that freedom of speech.
You would think.
That's not what's happening. If you were to go on a street corner and speak out against slavery, even in New York City, you'd get your ass beat.
That's news. Okay.
Now, that's one of these awful things, but this is like there's a lot of people who may not want slavery to spread, but they don't want it to abolished.
Right.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's that weird thing that's happening. Um, Another thing, so you think about the Supreme Court, and it's easy to think about like a lot of this story had so many tie-ins to right now. The Supreme Court is also very much under the sway of slave holding states because it's 1857 that you have the Dred Scott decision that African Americans should not be citizens of the United States. Now, the problem is that 5 out of 9 of the justices are slaveholders.
This checks.
So everything is stacked against.
Right.
And I think it's important for us to understand all of this because this makes that Civil War almost a foregone conclusion. Like you're watching this pressure build up.
Right.
Now we have other people like Clay and anti-slavery Republicans, and they're arguing against pro-slavery forces. Now you have in the South anti-slavery forces, they're being driven out of their communities. So like abolitionist newspapers, lecture halls that were hosting anti-slavery speakers, they're getting attacked by mobs, even up in Philadelphia and Boston. And we've kind
I
of
don't like
talked,
this.
I think we talked about the Philadelphia when we talked about Rebecca Crumpler.
I think we did. At very least, it was mentioned.
Yeah, so there's a lot of these things boiling over. And one thing we haven't touched on, at least that I can remember in our podcasts, is on the floor of the US Capitol, we have an abolitionist senator named Charles Sumner. He's beaten nearly to death for giving an anti-slavery speech.
On the floor? Like,
Yes.
right. Yeah, I can't say we've ever mentioned that. That's new.
Okay. So everybody is deep in their feels. Nobody has taken a couple of deep breaths. Nobody has said woosah. Nobody like we are
Has rubbed their
just
ears.
not that we are in it and we're going full tilt and we're doubling down on all of our decisions, good or bad.
Yeah, this feels really relevant.
Hmm. And here we have this dude named Eddie Yergason, and he's living in Hartford, Connecticut. It's February 25th, 1860. And this is at the start of the state's spring gubernatorial race. Honestly, everything seems pretty easy going, pretty normal. There's local Republicans who are running against a well-known incumbent candidate. They have a famous speaker in town to give him a campaign speech, and they're planning on doing a torch lit parade afterwards. But it's 1860. And so this isn't the ordinary year. As we've mentioned, we have these national tensions over slavery. They're at a fever pitch. And this was a few months earlier, or a few months before all of this happened. John Brown launched a raid on Harper's Ferry. And I touched on that in episode 100 when we covered Harriet Tubman.
Right.
Again, like I didn't go deep because he really deserves his own story. Maybe one day I'll get to it. John Brown, he's hoping to spark a slave uprising, and it ends up with his body swinging from Virginia gallows. And this ends up putting America further into their political corners. We're just riling everybody up even more. Everybody is expecting a really chaotic and ugly year that's going to culminate in what they imagine could potentially be a violent presidential election in November. We're in February.
Okay.
Now, this is the day that we have our boy Cassius Clay speaking at a rally in Hartford, Connecticut.
Okay.
Now, for those of you playing at home, he's a fierce abolitionist and we love him for it. And it's easy for us in our modern view of history to really assume that most people were abolitionists, hanging out on the right side of history because slavery is wrong. And so, of course, everybody believed that that's the truth. But that's not the
But
case.
as our boy Cassius discovered, that is not the case.
Yeah, no, not so much. Um, Now, I do have a brief synopsis about Cassius Clay for those who may not remember all the way back to 26 or haven't gotten
Let's
back
go.
there. Okay. Um, Cassius Clay, he's a bold and brawling Kentuckian abolitionist, equally skilled with a stump spear and a Bowie knife. He famously fought off six brothers who attacked him with guns, daggers, and cudgels at a political debate, killing one with a knife. And
God,
in
I love this
Connecticut,
man.
during this time, he promised to launch an insurrection against slavery.
Dad, a boy.
Okay, so now we have our dude, Eddie Yergason. He's getting ready to attend the rally. He's closing up shop at the textile store where he works and lives. And because at the time everybody's using these oil torches at the rally, he knows that they're going to sell out, so he steals his.
As you do,
Now,
I guess.
I mean,
We
look,
needed a
I
flashlight, you know?
honestly, don't think I've ever stolen from work, but I'm not going to say much.
I know I never have, but I'm thinking if you need a flashlight and hell's gone to is going in a handbag, probably get to take the flashlight, you know?
And honestly, maybe you can return it tomorrow. No harm, no foul. I don't know. I don't know. It's honestly, I don't know.
Let's go.
Okay. Um, so he planned on using an oil powered torch, but I guess the oil powered torches they spill occasionally, and this boy is known for wearing some really fly clothing. And so he decides he's going to do something to protect himself. So he creates an ad hoc cape because he's in
I
a
love
textile
this.
store.
Like, why wouldn't you?
So his four
Going to
friends,
hell in handbasket anyway.
you're gonna look fabulous.
Yeah. Trendsetter.
I mean, who among us? His four friends come and they end up seeing him and they're like, you know what? We need one too. So they basically end up skipping the meat and potatoes of the rally and all make capes to look fly.
This is giving.
Isn't it? Now they're each stitching their own fabric, stealing their own torches, and then jamming it into 6 foot curtain rods, I guess because of reach and also maybe continued protection from your own clothing.
Okay.
And as Clay wraps up his talk across the street, five clerks threw back their flashy black capes over their skinny little shoulders and stepped into the February darkness.
Loving this. Loving this. And I guarantee you, Clay was over there like, the hell?
Pretty much. Now, background on Eddie Yergason, he ends up making only $50 a year during this time. He's sleeping on a cot in the store. In his spare time, he sketches cartoons. He writes to his parents in rural Connecticut about his homesickness. And his fellow Cape wearers are basically the same. They're in their early 20s. They're living in cramped boarding houses or with their parents, and they're taking orders all day long. Now they look like uniformed men.
Love this.
Everybody leaves the building. They see these five men in these flashy capes and torches, and they escort Clay back to his hotel. Now, this isn't a small rally. This is 1,500 people pouring out onto the streets.
Love this.
And Clay and the actual organizers recognize the panache of these men when they see it. And so now these uniformed men are leading Hartford's most prominent Republicans down Main Street.
As you do when you look that flashy.
So these young 20-year-old boys, men, they look like headliners now.
Yeah. Listen, as my son would say, it's all about the drip.
What is the drip?
How cool you look.
Oh,
Do you look fly? Do you
okay.
have the right Nikes on? Does your collar pop the right way? How's your hair looking today?
Pretty poor, all of them. Thanks for asking.
You're welcome.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. Now, here's the thing that basically I didn't see coming, but I guess I should have because they end up getting into a fight with the Democrats in the street because the biggest thing you could do during the day was fight about politics.
This feels so today.
Yep. I mean, we've seen protest and anti-protest before, and it seems par for the course from today's standards.
Yeah, it really does.
This ends up being kind of a minor fracas by the standards of the 19th century, but it's proof of everything that Clay's warned against. For him, slavery is not just a matter of plantations in Georgia or Texas that the slave power and the Democratic Party imposed on everyone. The fight for democracy would play out in the streets of Hartford. Now, Clay, strict abolitionist, but if you look at, people speaking out against slavery further north or, whatever, what you're seeing is not them talking about being against slavery, but they want to be able to have free speech without getting their asses handed to them.
Okay.
So this is kind
I
of a
guess
very
kill two birds
interesting,
with one stone sort of
right,
thing.
right. You don't have to be abolitionist to be like, I should be able to say that out loud with my full chest.
Yeah, agreed.
Either way, these are the things. Now, the march ends with Clay getting to his hotel. He goes to bed. The workers collect torches. Yorgeson carefully folds up his little makeshift cave, and this becomes an artifact of a movement that is going to literally remake American democracy. And another young man, he's an editor for the Connecticut or the Hartford Courant. He put together an article for the evening. And in 1860, he cheered that the Republicans were, quote, finally wide awake.
Okay.
Because at this point, the Republican Party has been splintered, right? Because
Right.
you're not a Democrat, because you don't believe in having slaves, but you're also maybe not an abolitionist, or maybe you're anti-immigrant, or maybe, and so you don't have a unifying story that holds you together. There's no unifying thread of hatred to make you unite with your fellow
Fellow
political.
man.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And yeah, it's sad that I said united by hatred, but here we are.
It's a powerful mover.
It is. So, a week after the Clay March, we have 36 young men who are squeezed into a shabby third floor apartment. And this apartment's rented by J. Allen Francis. And this is above the Citibank where he worked. Now, the boys usually gathered in Francis's rooms to talk politics and sing. So, basically, TikTok.
Thank you for that visual. It was a choir in my mind, and then you said that, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Because they're not getting there and singing, "Oh, come all ye faithful."
Right. I gotcha.
Hmm. Now it's March 3rd, 1860, and this is when they decide to start a movement. These guys are between 18 and 24 years old at a time when the voting age is 21. So few had ever voted in a presidential election, and none of them had voted in anything this politically charged.
Right. I would think really at this time few people ever had.
Yeah. I mean, because you're not too far off the heels of the revolution when we're completely honest.
Yeah.
So they get to work. They organize a club. They start voting on how to, set everything up. They adopt a kind of spiffied up version of Yergason's shiny black cape as the uniform, and they elect a captain.
As you do.
So you need structure, you need order. So most agree it should be this dude named James Chalker. He's a combative, goateed Republican who fought Democrats so fearlessly a week earlier. So this is who you'd want to lead your uniformed military paramilitary organization.
This checks.
Now they have to do the thing where they pick a name. Now,
Mm. Put some options in a hat.
pretty much. Now
Mm.
there were elite organizations with names like Young Men's Republican Club, but then we also have some really
Okay.
cool ones because white people shouldn't name things, but we've got a couple exceptions here. There were violent street games at the time called the Dead Rabbits or the Blood Tubs.
Blood tubs. Love
And
this. That's fun to
honestly,
say.
violent street gangs, you guys can start winning. You can name stuff. I think we will allow you to enter the naming committee.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The Hartford boys, they don't go the straight laced, super boring name, but they also don't go down the blood path or the blood tub name. Um, they end up citing the article that, I referenced earlier, and they just start by shouting, "Why not the Republican wide awakes? The wide awakes." And it was the most popular expression at the time.
It's still catchy.
It is. And honestly, it seemed very reminiscent of woke, but I feel like woke has gotten hijacked.
I think you're right. Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see that theme pop up again.
Well, we are in a very heated political time.
Truth. Now, as all of this is happening, we also need to remember that I kind of alluded to this a second ago, that it's during the 1850s that we have the anti-immigrant Know Nothing movement that had often called their crews wide awakes. And they even had some similar floppy white hats, and they basically used it as a gang sign.
Hmm.
So there's some like muddled visual language there.
Okay.
Now, the youths who formed the Wide Awakes linked everything together in their own minds and building a new movement to fight against what they saw as multiple conspiracies against democracy. Because young men will typically rally together, shake their fists, and believe everything is completely black and white, not see nuance, and just go straight ahead.
Are you implying that men are good at this?
I'm saying I see patterns and signs.
I'm not saying that I'm a millionaire, but there'd be signs.
I mean, when I stop taking my medication, I won't tell anybody, but you'll all have a couple of ideas.
You'll be in the know.
The organization that's going to destroy slavery grows from these very interesting things because you have the symbology of the anti-immigrant know nothings with the very similar visuals. And then you also have a lot of these people that are very complicated and they have very, maybe not the best and cleanest backgrounds themselves.
Okay.
Basically, large groups of people are complex because people are complex, and the bigger the group is, the more
Yeah.
potential for things going south.
This also feels 100% like today.
Yep. Now, it's also interesting that, you don't have like a huge peaceful movement, right? You have people literally brawling in the streets. And it's very hard to convince somebody that your way is the most logical when you've just given them a black eye.
Are you sure?
I'm willing to try it myself, but I don't think it's worked previously.
Oh, so I was wrong. I owe somebody an apology.
And an ice pack. Now, they're not simply just fighting these battles, they're also, I'm going to scrap that whole sentence. Okay, so as all this is happening, we have something even crazier and more impressive that happens. Members of Yergason's club meet Abraham Lincoln
Okay.
because there's this entire storm happening in a teacup that is the US. Lincoln isn't the household name that we know right now, like in early
Right.
1860. He's
Right.
only really had like one term in office. He hasn't done a whole lot. He's a moderate. He's not a polarizing force.
Right. Darn it.
And he goes to Hartford to campaign. He's one of four candidates for the presidential race.
I hadn't even thought about other candidates at the time of Lincoln. Like
You
he
just
was the only
assume,
one in my
yeah,
mind.
he ran
Yeah.
unopposed and we put him into office.
Yeah, I kind of did. Like who else was there?
So the Wide Awakes show up and we have our dude Chalker, the one who's leading the group. He hollers about face, and 100 uniformed Hartford boys spun around and faced a mob because, of course, Lincoln preaching his, moderate views that don't include abolishing slavery, but don't include allowing it to spread, seemed charged in this political space. So there's a mob there. And that's when you have 100 wide awakes in complete uniform show up ready to defend the president or presidential candidate.
And this is all because some guy didn't want to spill oil on his own shirt.
Yes.
I love that little connection. That's so much fun.
This is like it's like wait a minute. He just wanted to keep his clothes nice?
Like, does he just put an apron on?
Pretty much. So Chalker yells charge, and then you have columns of wide awakes that just launch into the mob of hecklers. They're swinging their torches and they clear the square of 200 troublemakers. So the odds are 2-1, and they won, even though they were outnumbered. And it's at that point that the Republicans really have sent a loud message. And that's when the next meeting converts the respectable Republican club into a wide awake fighting force. So there's just a shift.
Okay.
The wide awakes gave off what one Southern observer referred to as, quote, an air of bayonet determination.
I also want to give off an air of bayonet determination.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
You'd
I
get a
mean,
lot more done,
don't you think? Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Speak softly, carry a big stick.
Big fan of that phrase. Thanks,
Yep.
Roosevelt.
Now, it's easy for you and I to assume that there's going to be some very polarized reporting on this subject,
You would think.
and there was. So, whatever you're imagining, it's worse.
I was imagining today's news.
Honestly, accurate.
Yeah.
Where you have the same event told through two different sets of eyes, and each set is completely riled up and feels very in the right and motivated by the exact same set of events.
Mm-hmm. And they look so different to the other guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's zero empathy that's greasing the wheels of anyone's brain to be able to see the other and be like, let's come to the middle, let's come to an understanding. Let's not
How
assume
about we
the other one
just
eats
tell the
babies.
story? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like I've never understood that about news. Just give us what actually happened and let us make our own opinion.
Yeah. So we have thousands of recruits that are joining the movement by early April. Started with
Okay.
five at the end of February.
And it's April.
It's April. And in the spring of 1860, there's a kid who's taking tickets at the Hartford train station. He starts getting, for whatever reason, a flood of letters from Republicans across the North asking how they can start wide awake companies.
The ticket kid is?
I don't, maybe they're all just coming to the train station and the mailman has nowhere else to deliver them. And he's like, I guess I'm the de facto opener of these
Okay.
letters.
I love this. Okay.
So he ends up printing up a form letter explaining how to organize a club, elect leadership, and design a uniform and how to march at night.
Because that's important.
Honestly, the uniform I feel like was probably the most deciding factor, as bizarre as that is.
No?
So they're trying to capture the movement's very combative vibe. And the young writer brags wherever the fighting is the hottest, there is their post of duty, and there the wide awakes are found.
Okay. Okay.
Now, the wide awakes at this point, in my mind, seem very much like that one kid, and I say kid, but young dude at the bar who's pretty much got some big chip on his shoulder and is talking about how big of a fighter he is and how much he's da 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 da. He's the first
But
one to
it's
go down.
never actually been in a fight.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
that's the vibe I get.
Okay.
Now we have all across the North that this idea, this fight is spreading. And the club, as a result, is also spreading like an absolute contagion. The club continues to grow and it starts really developing a bizarre diversity, which I can't say I saw coming.
I love this.
You have large number of immigrants that are joining, including Germans and Swedes, Lutherans and Jews, and there's even Catholics.
That would make sense when you think about what their goal is.
Elaborate on that.
Well, to me, when you think about like we're looking at just from this standpoint, we're looking at Lincoln and being a moderate, right?
Yeah.
And all of these diverse people are coming in and they're going to be the outliners of society, one way or the other. So coming into a group that is accepting, right? And is wants the troops, wants the numbers, and has a goal that is comparable to yours as far as like the furthering of society, whether that's to violently work their goal into the system or peacefully work their goal into the system. If you're agreeing with what they're up to, you're going to gain those people. And when you think about immigration and minority,
Hmm.
they will gather in those groups regardless of what the group looks like. So it makes sense to me when you're talking about this group of young men whose whole goal was to protect the Republican speaker
Yeah.
in the first place. And if that Republican speaker is speaking to what your goal in your personal life is, why wouldn't you follow him? Right? Like That's just my logic on that.
I'm here for it. I'm grateful you were, because I feel like this whole story is one I could just like steamroll over everything you say. So I want to make sure that I'm not taking all the oxygen.
I'm here for it. Take all the oxygen. I am loving it.
So we not only have all of these, disparate groups of men, but there's also young women who are forming wide awake auxiliaries.
Yes.
We have brave Republicans that are ordering companies in Baltimore, St. Louis, and even Washington, D.C. And that's where we're seeing notoriously violent pro-slavery street gangs. And
Okay.
pro-slavery street gangs seem so bizarre when you think that only 2% of the population is actually holding the slaves.
That is weird. And it makes you wonder why they're pro-slavery.
Yeah,
Because I can't see the 2% that are actual slaveholders being out in these street gangs.
yeah. Buford, Buford,
Yeah.
bring your cudgel, Buford.
It's not giving I'm just gonna say it's not giving Big Daddy from Django Unchained. Like that seems like
Yeah,
something he wouldn't find himself doing.
no. So, I mean, more of this opened a ton more questions than I've got answers to, but these are things.
Such is life.
On top of the people joining the Wide Awakes, you see, and this makes sense to me, Black men joining as well.
Again, the not majority of the population.
Yeah, I'm here for it. That makes sense. Now, this is kind of the cool thing to see these groups melting together to work together.
Hmm.
Black leaders form their own company in Oberlin, Ohio, and fugitive states and abolitionist leaders launch another one in Boston.
Okay.
Now, more than a century later, with many of the benefits of hard won civil rights victories, modern Americans hardly can grasp how powerful and jarring it would have been to see columns of African American men marching in military uniforms down Boston streets at midnight.
I mean, it's a visual. I'd have questions.
Honestly, I think if I saw, well, I live in Portland, one of the whitest cities in America. So I would be like, hey, we have that many?
Dude, side quest for a second. I also live in the whitest county in America, and someone was making a comment recently on one of the Facebook groups about something they saw in the road, and it was a coconut shell. And um somebody was like, "Oh, is it Big Danny's or whatever?" And Big Danny pops on and he's like, "Look, there are only 5 Samoans in Sonora. It cannot possibly be us. I can account for all 4 of us." And so was like, "Oh, did so and so go back?" And he's like, "Yeah, there was originally 7. There's only 5 now." And I was like, "Yep, this is Tuolumne County at its finest." That all of the Samoans can be accounted for in one go.
Yeah, the Simone cohort, and that is not ours. We will be taking no
Confirmed.
questions.
Not our coconut.
What a wild thread.
You're welcome. I love that I could contribute in such a strange way.
So we had talked about how the Southerners and basically everybody reports on the news in the most inflammatory way possible. The Southerners see this army of destruction that's training in the night, and they decide to inflame fears through
As you do.
spreading deliberate disinformation about seditionist plot or and seditionist plots.
Okay.
So as the election heats up, we're now like September, October, we have Southern papers that are fretting about this massive midnight uprising. They're creating so much hysteria about the Wide Awakes. In Virginia, one editor insists that Wide Awakes are hiding rifles under their capes. I mean,
Are they?
yeah,
They've got the space down there.
don't they? In Georgia, they alleged that they are plotting wild orgies of blood, carnage, lust, and rapine.
That is not how I would describe what I understand of an orgy, but okay.
I
You
mean,
do
if
you.
I've never been to an orgy, but the second it becomes an orgy of blood, I'm out.
I think we're out. I mean, honestly, I'm not walking in to begin with, but it feels nothing like what we know of the Roman dinner parties, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so now we have this all leads up to November 6th of 1860. This ends up being what has been referred to as one of the most significant election days in American history. It's in it drew one of the highest number of turnouts ever recorded. We had 81.2% of eligible voters that go to the polls.
Wow. Okay.
And because I had to look it up, do you know voter turnout percentage for 2024?
I want to say it was probably 64%.
Dang, you're close. It's 63.9. So 64%.
Oh,
Go buy a
10
lottery
points to
ticket.
me.
Yeah.
I am
Uh,
winning.
dude, so much so. So not only do we have massive voter turnout, we have tens of millions more people who are waiting from the sidelines because, women and minorities
Hmm,
can't vote. So
right. Yeah, that sucks.
the wide awakes welcome the dawn in the most unhinged way possible. They're celebrating with fireworks, cannon fire, and then they spend the day, quote, patrolling polling places across the north, which sounds super chill.
Super chill. They're just handing out coffees to everyone.
Yeah. Now, depending on how you plan to vote, they're either protecting your democracy or they're intimidating rivals.
This feels like today. Okay.
Yep. So all of it said and done, everybody's cast their votes. Lincoln is sitting nervously in the telegraph office in Springfield, and companies of wide awakes stood at attention outside.
That is wild.
That is not a visual I at all ever heard of when we heard about Lincoln.
Yeah, never. Never in 1,000 years.
So news comes slowly across the wires. Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, and nearly every doubtful state had voted Republican.
Get it?
Lincoln, he's one of four candidates. He'd only won 39.8% of the popular vote,
Okay.
but he ends up clearing house and getting three-fifths of the electoral college.
Okay.
So this is another one of those popular vote versus electoral. And
Yeah.
yeah, however you feel about it, there's a ton of really bizarre races. Now, in my brain, as I kind of like learned about the wide awakes, this showed to me how much of a steamroller was going towards the Civil War
Mm-hmm.
because everybody hears about the election results. South Carolina succeeded a little more than a month after Lincoln's victory.
Oh, okay. Didn't see that coming.
Members of its secession convention invoked, quote, the wide awakes of the North and their way out of the Union. As Republicans worried about attacks on Lincoln's inauguration, the wide awake hotheads talked of going to Washington to protect their candidate because threats of assassination seem credible.
Oh, foreshadowing?
Well, yeah, pretty much. One letter to Lincoln promised if you say the word, I will be there with from 20 to 1,000 men, organized and armed.
On your command, sir.
Paramilitary,
That's not terrifying even a little bit.
even if they're on your side.
Yeah, no, not even just a little bit.
Lincoln is pretty stinking smart and he discouraged the escalation. He writes a letter back. He thanks the people in Hartford and the Wide Awakes for their great services, but implies that their work is done. And yet, as the inauguration nears, strangers with Yankee accents and revolvers in their pockets start to appear in the Capitol's boarding houses. Lincoln finally rides
Hmm.
down Pennsylvania Avenue to accept the presidency. He delivers his stirring inaugural address in March of 1861, and hundreds of plainclothes wide awakes filled the crowds around him.
That is not at all, that gave me chills. That is not at all what I thought his inauguration would look like.
Right. And like at one point in one of the podcasts, because all the podcasts that exist about the wide awakes that I found all had featured the author of the book. kind of talking about the Wide Awakes. And in
Hmm.
one of them, he talked about how as Lincoln is walking off stage, the members of the audience are pulling out items that identify them as wide awakes, like the hat or the whatever. And so slowly everybody is I like coming out and being like, hey,
It
the
becomes
entire
aware.
crowd.
Like, we got you.
Yeah. Which is exactly what
Bananas.
he didn't want.
I didn't ask for this.
Yeah, like, thanks, guys. You're just stirring the pot now, though.
I've
So
already won. Let's go now.
a month later, the Confederates fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. So the bombardment sparks the war, but doesn't kill a single person. You
Oh, you
ready?
know who was chilling below Fort Sumter around this time?
Our man Smalls.
Yeah. What a show you've given today.
I know. I'm just trying to tie in every single episode that we've gotten. Um, the real bloodshed that happens in the Civil War comes when two clashes involving the Wide Awakes. It's April 19th, 1861. We have the National Volunteers, a pro-Southern Democratic militia that's organized in Baltimore and Washington, and they're doing it in response to the Wide Awakes. They end up attacking Massachusetts troops marching through Baltimore, killing several. Not long after, armed wide awakes in St. Louis capture all 800 members of a Democratic militia who were accused of Confederate leanings, and they fire on the crowd, killing 30 people.
Dang it.
So, this is why the wide awakes are so hard to talk about.
Right. That feels kind of, that feels exactly like you'd think that it would be, though, when you're talking about a group that's so easily riled.
Yeah, hair
Yeah.
trigger.
Yeah. Yeah. Good word. Yeah.
Now, it's at this point we have wide awakes that are racing to join the Union Army because before they had been operating outside.
Right. Okay.
So, whole companies are enlisting together in the war's first weeks. Now, estimates are shaky, but some suggest that three-quarters of the nation's wide awakes fought in the war.
Wow. Okay.
This means that over 50% of the Northerners are wide awakes.
I'm not shocked.
Now, the Hartford Originals, they're in the epicenter. We have about
Again, not
seven
shocked.
tenths of their company's officers that enlist, and many right when the war begins in April and May. Now, the
Okay.
five people who show up in the capes and really kick this off, 4 out of 5 are in the mix.
And I'm sure Five didn't show up because he lost a shoe or something. Because you have to look flashy going in.
Well, are you ready for this? I at least got this. Eddie Yergason, he's the one who started it. He wrote his mother that he planned to enlist, and she wrote back a stern letter telling him to, quote, not do anything rashly, pleading with him to appreciate your mother's feelings. No one on this broad earth cares for you as much as your mom. He waited a year and then enlisted in Connecticut's 22nd Regiment. And a photograph shows him still basically a kid. He's described as a skinny wraith with piercing dark eyes swallowed up by a great army coat.
Did not lose his left shoe.
He did not. So he wasn't the fifth who didn't fight, but it was almost three-fifths.
That's okay.
Now, it takes a long time. It takes decades for Jurgensen to grasp basically what he had done. After creating the first cape, he fell into the background of the original club. He's not old or well established enough to win elections as an officer, but then as the Gilded
Which is
Age,
wild when you consider it was him that made the first cape.
it is. And I get back to him and how he ends his life, and it's kind of incredible and fascinating. So we now have like the Gilded Age opening up. We have
Right.
everybody. Basically, if you were a wide awake and you had a high leadership place, you rose to prominence. You just were elevated to greatness after the Civil War. So
This
the wide
feels,
awakes
yeah.
were a launching point. Now he starts to show off his original cape that he had shown and the published letters in the Hartford Courant explaining that, quote, I was the first one to wear a cambric cape with 4 other young men. We originated the wide awakes. and other members affirm Yergason's versions of events.
I love that. Okay.
So he knows like I did this. This is because of me.
Sorry.
Now, he goes on to be an interior decorator in President Benjamin Harris's White House.
Of course he does. Why am I not even a little bit shocked?
Harrison's also a wide awake.
Of course he is.
And it's Yergason who enlivened the old mansion with electric lighting and bold color schemes and modern window treatments.
It is always the modern window treatments.
Because he just wanted to be fabulous.
Hmm.
And I've got some pictures.
Oh, please tell me you do.
So this is one of the original Wide Awake flags.
Okay.
I'll let you describe it.
Um, it says, okay, so it's kind of like a goldish, tannish color. Original Wide Awakes, Hartford, Connecticut, organized March 7, 1860. It's got an eye,
Mhm.
fully awake, painted in the middle. I think it's painted anyway.
Yeah, that would look like that to me.
Yeah.
And then this is a picture of them.
Heavens, they are wearing, their capes look shiny.
They are.
Shiny capes with at least five, maybe six of them have these sort of, they're the torches. Okay, on the curtain rods.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, that's crazy. And their hats are very reminiscent of exactly what you would imagine a cross between a Civil War Union soldier to wear and a police hat from the
Mm,
time. There's five, six, seven, eight, nine, at least 10 men in this photo, and most of them have killer facial hair.
truth.
They're very serious, all very serious looking. They
Well,
have
it
business
takes
to
like
attend.
30 minutes to take a single photo. You're not going to be able to cheese it for that long.
I'm thinking they weren't gonna cheese it anyway.
No, no, you got to be intimidating.
Yeah, they're very intimidating. Yeah, I'll give you that. I love it. Absolutely. I love it.
And that is the story of the Wide Awakes that I was just like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. What?
Hold on.
This all happened because some young man decided not to get his clothes all jacked up and actually nearly missed basically missed the rally he'd planned to go to anyhow.
I love that for him. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Proof that fashion will get you anywhere.
Mhm.
Love that.
And it was neat to touch on like a dozen different stories we've covered.
Yeah. For a dozen different amazing human beings or moments in time. Yes.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, Robert Smalls is down there figuring out which barge he's gonna pilfer. Love this.
You said Robert Smalls, and I wanted to rename him at least his first name. And so I had to look it up. And you're right. You're right. I should have known
Thanks.
better. It was your story anyhow.
Hey, listen, we all have our moments. I constantly read our already done list because I am convinced I'm going to do one again.
It'll be like, huh, really? The Cascade Girls of New Orleans. Okay.
Hmm. I like
What
the
new
story. Let's,
what new facts are you going to bring to us this time?
yeah, I love it. Sometimes I come across names that I'm like, who is that?
I mean, that's what made this story so interesting because I'm like, oh, from that, and then from that, and then from that. And I'm like, well, who is this? Don't say that name because there's already a ton of names in the story, and
We got
you,
this.
yeah.
Thank you. That made my day.
So if you're wondering, holy crap, has Teresa's Roman Empire turned to the Civil War? Or is there anything else that I really need to know? Rate, review, subscribe. Join us next week when we undoubtedly is going to touch on at least World War II because we've had a surprising number of Civil War stories.
I know it feels weird.
Yeah, and share us with your favorite baby goat herder. And on that note, goodbye.
Goodbye. would I have a favorite baby goat herder.